So, why? And what do you see as the issues we should be considering?
Why I'm running, or
why you're running, policy specific, and what are the issues that you think we should consider in making our decision?
Well, policy specific, I think that we need to promote the health and the welfare of the citizens of Richmond, and we can do that by getting rid of blight, infilling, making sure that the city develops from within and not through developments outside of the city limits. I also see promoting businesses, and one of the things I'd like to do is to create a symposium for all the moms and pops, so that they can do what the Chamber of Commerce has failed to do.
Hold on one second. You are?
Robert Rogers.
Oh, Robert. I'm sorry. We've never met face to face. We've never met face to face.
He's a writer in Canada.
Okay.
Dark horse.
Okay. So you create a symposium for all yes?
I'm sorry?
You create a symposium?
Yes, a symposium for all the mom and pop grocery stores, so that they can develop their own ways of promoting health within the community. I've noticed that the mom and pops sell what they think the community wants to buy, and the community is stuck with buying what they're selling. So there's this closed circle. There's a store that stopped selling alcohol, and they're still, and they replace the alcohol with fruits and vegetables, and they're still thriving. And the community, as a result, is eating better. So if we can get moms and pops to start making those kinds of changes, so that the diet of the residents of Richmond improves, through choice in education, I think it's all the better.
Okay, Tom, what do you see as the issues?
Richmond is actually in a great place right now. We've had several really good years, and I think we're on a roll. Some of the things that I want to continue to work on and see come to fruition, one of them is the Chevron Energy Project. You all know it was derailed by a legal challenge in a court order, and I wrote and introduced the legislation that put it back on track. Met with the Chevron people, got the entire city council to sign on to a commitment to expedite the process, get it right, make it bulletproof, get that project under construction, create 1,000 jobs, and move on. So that's
where's it at?
Say again?
Where's it at?
It is they are preparing the EIR, and we have team meetings frequently. We meet with Chevron. We meet.
Who's we and what's the team?
The city. Well, there's kind of three different groups. There's the city and Chevron group. There's the city and the environmentalist group, and then there's the internal city and their consultant group. And there are three city council members. Jeff Ritterman and the mayor and I are on a ad hoc subcommittee to keep that project on track. So we're looking at trying to get it permitted in early 2013.
And why do you think it's going to go through this time instead as opposed to last?
We have an incredible team. Everybody has confidence in it. Environmentalists, Chevron, the city's legal people. And we just, every mistake we made last time, we're not making it again.
Why is that? Why do you think that is?
I think because we made a commitment to get it right. We knew, and some of the things we did wrong last time is they tried, both Chevron and the city people tried to cut corners. The EIR was flawed, it was vulnerable. It turned out that it was successfully challenged. So we wanted to take each one of those mistakes and get ahead of the game, make it right this time.
Since you're sitting here as an incumbent, what other issues do you see that we should be considering?
So that's number one. Number two, we just passed a really cutting edge general plan 2030. Contrary to what some people might tell you, it is a very aggressively pro-growth, pro-development, pro-jobs document, and it also has the first health element in the entire United States, and it's cutting edge in a lot of ways, and it has a lot of implementation actions embedded in it, and I look forward to starting to pick those off. We've already done some, and we're going to continue. But it's a very, very good document. And that kind of is a segue to number 3, and that is particularly taking the economic development element of that and seeing it through. And we're already seeing successes. You know, just in the last few months, there have been 3 major employers that have relocated to Richmond. Each one of them has 80 to 100 employees. Nutiva was one of them. They just had a job fair. They're hiring 100 people. They're, you know, kind of a green natural foods company. Exos is a company that makes exoskeletons for disabled people. And then just last night we approved a loan for a company that makes basically provides body parts for, you know, replacement body parts, and they're hiring about 80 people, and so we're just knocking these things down, job after job after job. You know, we have Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory coming to Richmond. As I said before, I think the city's really on a roll, and I really look forward to being a part of seeing these projects through.
Okay, let me just ask you one question that I want to ask the incumbents in particular. Can you give me your sense of the long-range fiscal forecast for the city?
You know, Richmond is in good financial shape. You probably know that it led the county both last year and this year in the increase in assessed valuation. We've had balanced budgets since 2004. We have a great management team in place, and I think that the economic fiscal forecast for Richmond looks good. You know, back in 2004, we had our own financial crisis, and we adopted several reforms that most cities are just now getting around to doing. So we were way ahead of the game.
Okay. We'll come back to that. Marilyn?
Hi. Yeah, I want to, in the policy area, I'd like to elevate the voice of the Richmond residents in the decisions that are made at the council level. In terms of the Chevron project, I think that will be a major issue we're facing, and it will be a great opportunity to fix what went wrong the last time around and really make sure we have the best possible safeguards and environmental protections in it. The last EIR was considered flawed because it didn't specify a plan for mitigating the greenhouse gases that were anticipated to increase. So I think that's something we can learn from, and I'd like to see those GHG mitigations happen as close to home as possible, which could create local green
Do you
jobs.
agree with Tom's assessment that it's going better this time and that there's more cooperation?
Absolutely. While I was working for the mayor, as you know, until last April, and so I sat in with her on these council committee meetings. I think it's been very cooperative. We've talked extensively with the city staff and the Chevron representatives and the consultants, and I think it's going in a good direction. At the same time, we need to make sure it's done right. Also addressing the issue of possibly the refining of heavier crude and higher sulfur crude, which we're still waiting to get the final results on the investigation from the fire as to whether higher sulfur crude could be responsible for more corrosion of the pipes. So those are all things I think we need to look at very carefully and making sure the project gets done in a really good way and approved in a really good way. I'm also interested in addressing that issue of unemployment, not only by attracting new jobs, by making the city as attractive as we can, but also reducing barriers to employment. I supported the Ban the Box ordinance that was just passed for city jobs. I'd like to see that possibly expanded to companies that contract with the city, so that those returning from incarceration do have a really good second chance to find work and become productive members of the community. I'm also very interested in having perhaps a complete streets ordinance. that would make the streets very usable and friendly for all types of users, including cars and trucks, of course, but also pedestrians, cyclists, wheelchair users, people pushing strollers, to make it safe and usable for everyone and attractive, and also help the environment by encouraging more people to use alternatives to individual car trips. So I'd like to see that, and I'd like to just promote the health of our city. If the soda tax passes and Measure O passes, and I thank the Times for endorsing Measure O, I'm committed to making sure we have the proper oversight to make sure that any income from that tax does go to promoting healthier sports and recreation and nutrition programs for our residents.
I assume you appreciate our endorsement of O, but not our endorsement of then.
Well, we'll let the voters decide on that one.
Fair enough. That's fine. Fair enough. Yeah. That was diplomatic. Yeah. Okay. Are there other issues you see? I mean, you're somebody who has tended to watch local government for a long time. Your sense of the finances of the city?
I think the city is, given the overall landscape that we live in, where local governments are really struggling, and the state has taken away a lot of our funds by, eliminating the redevelopment agency and limiting the ways in which local governments can raise revenues. I think we're doing very well in comparison to many cities. As Tom mentioned, we have an excellent management team with our city manager and our finance director and his staff have done a great job of keeping us on track, making sure we don't overcommit in any way. And so I think the city is going in a good direction. I want to monitor that and make sure we can do the best we can with the funds we have available and address all of our, employee needs, avoid layoffs, and get the most services we can with the money we have available.
Okay. Mark, I don't know a whole lot about you.
Newcomer.
Pardon?
New one coming up on the block.
Okay. So give us a very quick who you are, why you're, and what you bring to the table there.
I'm Mark Wasberg. I'm in the entertainment business, actor, filmmaker, talk show host. I edit film. In 2004, Richmond was designated the most dangerous city in the state. And it stayed like that until 2009. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there is no policy in Richmond. I said, we need a massive job training program, and we need education. Now, the jobs are coming in on the Livermore Lab. Now, that's going to have high-tech jobs, and only 1% of the people here in Richmond will qualify for those jobs. I know for a fact that most of the jobs has moved out of Richmond. Manufacturing jobs, skilled labor jobs. See, this is what we need. We don't need jobs that people are going to put bones together making $5, $6, $7, $8, $10 an hour, $11 an hour. We need good paying skilled jobs, $15 to $20, $25 an hour.
How would you get there?
Job training program, bring in businesses, give businesses tax cuts. This is what we need. We need to promote job training program. We need to bring the skilled labor in, set up job training programs so people could go to school and learn these jobs. See, this is why unemployment is high. Education is a disaster. What I'm saying is, as you look at the record, there is no major policy here in Richmond. Because in 2004, when Richmond was designated the most dangerous city in the state, I think they passed a tax bill to hire new police officers.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Richmond is one of the few cities, if not the only city in the county that has its own jobs training program, or its own jobs program, right?
Yeah, but it's not enough. It's not bringing in good skilled labor jobs.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, I guess what I'm asking you is, I hear that you feel that way, and you can say you want it to happen, but help me understand the reality of, just pounding on the table and saying I want it to happen doesn't make it happen. Show me, give me a sense of the game plan. I don't sense this is a city that hasn't been trying to bring in jobs, but maybe I'm wrong here.
Well, we could get the shipyards going again. The mothball fleet is sitting out there with all kinds of rusted buckets out there. We could bring the mothball fleet back here, back into Richmond, cutters, welders. We could make the shipyard live again. that's going to have a bulk of job training and good paying jobs. You see what I'm saying? We need to bring the manufacturing jobs back. That's what makes money. If you have a healthy economy, then you're going to have a low crime rate. And people are going to work. People are going to have a good standard of living. See, this is how it's all about education and job training programs. This is what builds the city. This is what builds a community. And this will build trust in people so they know that they have a future. Not to work at some place where you're going to put bones together, mannequins, or a food processing plant and make $11 an hour. You cannot live on that here in Richmond. Because I know, I worked manufacturing job for about 15 years. I was forced to go into a job training program because all the jobs were drying up. And plus the crime rate is still a disaster. The city council did nothing to stop the crime rate. Sure, the crime rate is dropping because that's why the gangsters are killing each other. And plus they're in jail. You see what I'm saying?
Matt?
Well, there's no question that.
Let me just back up for a second. Remind me, you've been on the council from when to when to when to when?
Well, I first got elected in '67, and I went off the council in 90.
You're gonna have to speak up because I've got a fan of me. Yeah.
And I went off the council around '88, and then I ran for re-election in '98, and so I've got to come by.
And you've been on since?
Yeah, I got to come by and total some 30 plus years.
Okay, so 67 to 88 to 98 to the present.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I had the right numbers and the right information. Go ahead.
Well, it's true that Richmond has benefited a great deal. But our problems still resolve around economic development and also creating a climate that is proactive toward the business community. We have secured the Lawrence Livermore Lab, which is a prestigious situation. But again, it's not going to create a huge number of jobs for the level of our population, meaning that low-income people less educated, are not going to be able to get into those jobs. But by bringing them to Lawrence Livermore Lab, there's satellite opportunities where businesses will be located in and around the lab that will be beneficial. Chevron continues to be a real important project that we've got to move forward on. I don't want to see Chevron leave the city. They provide some 30+% of our total tax revenue to the general fund. And we can ill afford to run them out of town. With respect to some of the other businesses, I think we need to create the climate at City Hall. I share some of the viewpoints that Tom indicated, but this is the first time I've heard about the involvement with Chevron. There's a segment on that.
This is the first time you've heard about what?
About the continued involvement with Chevron to proceed. I knew that there was a committee. They don't report to anyone. There's a part of the city of Richmond structure that is almost secretive. They get together, they exclude anyone else. We don't have any kind of open discussion. Progress report, we've never had a progress report to tell us, hey, here's the steps and we're doing this and this and this. So we find—
Is that true, Tom?
We never had we never had an executive session. We never had a discussion about a full council to update us as it relates to the steps.
Okay, let's let you two really quickly sort this out.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your take? What's What's happening? What's the reality there?
Well, there's been a whole series of public meetings that the public has been invited
Yeah,
to.
but I guess what I hear Nat talking about is the negotiations going on. I mean, is the
there
council
aren't
being kept
negotiations.
apprised of what's going on?
No, there aren't negotiations going on. What there is, the entire council, including Nat and me, signed on to a resolution committing to make this thing work, in short. And we hired consultants, and all those were approved by the city council and paid for by Chevron. And so the city council's been involved in that. And then basically the work that this whole team is doing involves the Chevron staff, city staff, our consulting team, and they are working through trying to get an EIR done and get a permit done. And there's nothing secretive about it. It's just part of the process, and it's going very well.
So they're going to bring, this group is going to bring something to you guys? What, I'm not sure.
Well, eventually they're going to produce an EIR. And our goal this time is not to have an EIR that once it hits the ground, it's attacked by everybody. Our goal is to have an EIR that all these parties bought into.
So it's the same project basically, but better EIR.
It's a little smaller.
Okay.
Physically.
Okay. But the idea is that what they're working on is not redefining the project in a big way. It's just trying to come up with a better EIR.
And if you ask Chevron how are things going, I think they'll tell you exactly what I'll tell you. They'll tell you the city's hired a great consulting team. They'll tell you that the process is going as fast as it can go. They'll tell you that any delays in the original timetable have been the fault of Chevron because they have had to sort of get their act together and get information out. So, and I think if you talk to the environmental people, they'll tell you that this is different from last time because they're being included in the process and it's transparent.
So Nat feels though like he doesn't know what the hell's going on with this.
I can't speak for Nat.
I'll tell you this.
We
approve certain contracts. That's the last we hear. We want to hire X, Y, Z. We want to do this and do that. That's the end of it. No one, and this is symbolic of what is happening throughout the city. For an example, we had the bike trail, whereby we committed $40 million.
Let's stick with Chevron.
I'm just trying to give you a composite of how individually the PLO, the Richmond Progressive Alliance, is dominating the city council. They're the ones who dictate what goes and what doesn't. And I'll allude to some of those later on, perhaps. But with respect to Chevron, the 3 council members do not come back to the full council and say, here where we are at, we have done A, B, C. We're now getting ready to do X, Y, Z. We've never had a report to the council to that
Okay,
extent.
so let me ask you.
Can I just say one
Yeah,
thing?
real quick, Tom.
Well, last time was the time that there really were secret negotiations going on. You know, the whole community benefits agreement was negotiated by a small group in the city council, and by the time the rest of us saw it, it was a done deal. I can tell you, none of that stuff's going on this time. You know, the same information that we're getting in these meetings is being distributed to the entire public in a series of public meetings. They're getting the PowerPoints about Refinery 101, and they gave another one on CEQA and how it affects refinery projects. And I mean, this is a really open deal, and I think that anybody, including people in the city council, who want to know what's going on, just have to show up. I've never seen that at any of those meetings, you know. And you know, if you don't show up to find out what's going on, you're not going to find out. It's a very transparent process.
Okay, so Nat, what are your other issues?
As I indicated, we are moving nicely toward trying to attract new businesses. I don't agree with Tom in terms of our financial position. We're in serious trouble.
Why is that?
Because we keep kicking the can down the road.
On what?
In terms of balancing the budget. We won't bite the bullet and say, hey, look, we've got to do something. One is our pension. Our pension is atrocious in terms of what we're going to have to pay. We just passing the cost to one generation to another generation. eventually someone is going to have to come forward and say, hey, we have to revise our pension system and program. I was in Alameda County when a lot of the pension situation came forward.
Tell you what, why don't you hold that thought and we'll double back to this, okay? Okay, what, anything else I should know about?
Well, the dysfunction of our council is horrendous. All you got to do is look at the council meeting on any given night, and you see the bickering, the lack of unity, the lack of respect. That is detrimental to any city that goes and try to attract businesses and bring forward. And again, decisions are made that does not inclusive of the community itself. And at some point, I'd like to give you about 3 or 4 points that prove.
No, I don't. No. We're going to keep moving along,
right.
Okay?
Well,
because we got too many people.
I understand that.
Okay. Okay, Mike.
Yes, sir.
So why are you running? What do you stand for? And what do you want?
Good question. It's brief to the point. I proudly can tell you I was born, lived, and will proudly die in Richmond, California. I am a 10th generation Californiano. My family has been in what is called Richmond and San Pablo since the 1790s.
And why are you running?
I will be very brief. I'm professional. I'm aggressive. I have good mediation, negotiation, arbitration skills. I bring a lot to this dialogue, and I want to thank the Times for this opportunity on behalf of my family and I to be here today. Very quickly, we are hearing bits and pieces here about economic development. Well, I have a prepared statement that says it all. If you're satisfied, then we can move on to Mr. Bell.
No, I don't want you reading prepared statements.
Well,
I want to know. I want to know what your issues are.
Okay, my issues are economic development.
And what do you want to do about it?
There must be a comprehensive, inclusive collaboration among stakeholders, number one. High involvement in developing a consensus that will serve Richmond needs first. A common vision towards long-term goals based on widespread economic participation, engagement, and ownership that will sow deep roots.
Mike, let me cut you off for a second and ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
What you're saying to me are lots of words and platitudes, but bring it down to what specifically you want to do.
Community needs. Look.
And it's it's the same question I asked earlier.
Okay,
I want
here's
to know
what this is
specifically
coming
what you
down
want.
to. Right now, we need leadership that will supply answers to questions. One, that will resolve the issues that are currently surrounding. I am a very qualified, seasoned professional, and I can supply many of those answers. Right now, we need leadership. I'm consistent in the message and the theme. I play hardball. I don't back down, and I don't back off. Right now,
Hardball with whom? You're trying to track businesses. Who are you playing hardball with?
I am talking about that right
it.
now. I don't have time for fluff stuff. I am here with one goal, to win an election to serve the community. I believe it an honor and a privilege to be a candidate. I believe it an honor and a privilege to be an elected community official. I am very well versed in what the issues of the community that I have served for well over 38 years are, sir. And I will just tell you to cut the fluff stuff. I believe that it's time right now that there must be a greater economic development plan that is acceptable to the community, that is acceptable to the city government of Richmond and the team organization upon my election to the council.
And what would that plan look like?
Will send to you, I have a detailed economic development plan that has 5 components in education, friendly business environment, quality of life, disciplined land use, and modern infrastructure. The key development, it is quite clearly said that in 2010, that 10,000 businesses exited the city of Richmond under public record because of the current administration, which is largely the Richmond Progressive Alliance influenced. One. Number two, 18,000 of those jobs that left Richmond were at the heart of Richmond, California. families that live there. We have an unofficial unemployment of 32% unemployment in my community. We have grown men in my age out pushing lawnmowers and recycling and having yard sales because that is the best they can do. We are over highly taxed. And you know, it is now time for this community to go ahead. The madness must stop. And that is my message to this group of you here.
Okay,
Hardball
hardball
simply means that there is an economic development plan that I can offer, bring to this plate that is totally acceptable to the powers that be of this community, in Richmond, the city government, and the wider community. And that is my vision, that is my plan.
Gary?
Okay, I'm running because I think I can do a better job than the people that are sitting on the council currently, most of them. And if I thought that the people that were there were doing a good job, then I would enjoy the benefits of what they were doing. I think it's our civic responsibility.
Who do you think you can do a better job then? Because you currently are distinguishing.
Oh, absolutely. I think I can do a better job than all the candidates here. Of course, me, Tom, and Nat probably run pretty equal. But I think my qualifications and background and skills will allow me to do a much better job than some of the people that aren't running, obviously. And I believe it's our civic responsibility to engage in the process when you think you can do a better job. The areas I intend on focusing on would be specifically jobs, public safety, and civil leadership. And as it relates to jobs, obviously I agree with some of the comments that were made before, attracting jobs and companies that are compatible to the job skill sets of our community, making sure that the current companies that are in Richmond aren't leaving or thinking about leaving, and then trying to find those companies that want to expand and need to expand, and helping and assisting them to expand their businesses in the city of Richmond.
Why do you think you can do more than it's already being done?
Well, I think I can do more
than what's already being done. Or what's wrong? What's wrong? You know, it's not like this isn't a city that doesn't attempt to do this. What's wrong with their efforts now?
Well, I think, like Councilman Bates said, the lack of civil leadership in the council meetings, the way you conduct your business and address the business of the city, will be emulated by the community in some senses. And you got to have some respect and credibility when you go out into the community and ask them to join you to make the city a better place. And so currently the council is in somewhat of a disarray. There's no unity there, and there needs to be a balancing effect to allow that to happen. But the other thing I think I bring is I'm a business person myself. I work with small businesses and businesses all the time. I understand the needs of businesses, and therefore I think I would be very equipped to help them to achieve their goals. I mean, when we have businesses in our city who are successful, then the city itself is successful. That's how we derive revenue. That's how we provide services to the community, some of the basic services to the community. And so you need to have someone that has a good business acumen and a respect for business and understand what individual business people go through, especially if they're a sole proprietorship or someone that's trying to make a living at a certain craft or trying to make a living at a certain trade.
And so you're really about business and economic development.
I'm about taking care of the business of the city. I'm about making sure we get back to the basics of what local government should be about, which is providing for the public safety, providing a business climate where people who want to risk their capital and start a business venture in our city can do so with some confidence that the local leadership will be supportive of them and understand what their needs are. I'm also about making sure that public safety is an element of that, because no one wants to have their business in a community where they don't feel safe. And we need to have the public safety elements to ensure that happens. Currently, for example, this most recent incident at Chevron gives a clear example of why we are looking at the real safety, not just the industrial safety ordinance, but the real safety of our entire community. I mean, we have a shortage in our fire department currently right now, for example, that needs to be addressed. We have to deploy fire resources to Chevron to help them deal with that fire out there. And,
so how would you address that shortage in the fire department?
How would you address it?
You said you had a shortage in the fire department?
Well, we have, my understanding is that we have a couple of positions in senior management in the fire department that are currently unfilled.
And what would you do about it?
We find a way to fill them. And we would address it. We would need to be very clear with the public that either we aren't going to fill these positions and we're going to accept the risk, or we're going to find a way to fill those positions.
What would you give up?
It all depends. I mean, but I tell you what, public safety is a high enough priority. There has to be a few things down at the bottom that would have to either be given up, or, like anyone in business understands, you go out and create the revenue. I mean, you don't have to always give up something to get something. Sometimes you have to go out and work a little harder. Sometimes you got to be a little more creative. I mean, I've run a business before. I know what it means to take risks. And I know what it means that if you don't have what you have today, you don't say, well, I got to give this up to get something. You either figure out, how do I work harder to get it? Or how do I become creative with the resources I have to make it happen? Maybe you move some things around, maybe you make some adjustments, but it's not a simple thing of either or. And at the same time, the one thing you have to be real careful about is you don't fear the future. You don't say, well, if I do this, then this is going to be a negative result. You go forward, and you make those tough decisions. And you know that whatever decisions you make, that you have to live with those decisions. And that's what needs to happen. And so the whole idea that we may not have enough money, you can't make a decision based on that. You got to make a decision on what's most important and how do we achieve those goals. I don't even know how I'm going to do certain things tomorrow, but I'm not afraid to get up in the morning and walk out the door.
Okay, so let me come back to something Nat touched on here, because frankly, I was surprised that only Nat even touched on the issue. My look at the numbers is that I'm a little concerned about your long-term financial prognosis.
Yeah.
And I'd like to start with you, Tom, since you're one of the two incumbents here. You seem to feel that everything's hunky-dory. Tell me why everything's hunky-dory.
Well, first of all, Richmond is running lean. We've dropped 200 employees in the last 3 years. And, we're down, we're quite lean and mean. And I think that our management team takes this seriously, and
takes what seriously?
They take it seriously that we have ongoing economic challenges. And so there are a combination of factors here. Richmond is going to have to continue to look at compensation and pension reform. It's something we're going to have to take up. Second of all, on the revenue side, as I said before, things are actually looking pretty good in Richmond. As I previously said, Richmond's had the highest percentage of real property valuation increases in the county. They've led the county the last 2 years. Sales taxes are up. So revenues are in a good trend. As I said before, the city's been dropping employees. We have some work to do with compensation and pension reform, but everything taken together, we're not in a crisis. We're in a lot better shape than most cities in California.
Nat, you raised the issue. You want to quickly give me your assessment?
The last budget that we had, we started out, I think, with about $3-4 million in deficit. And the city manager came back, and the finance came back, the director came back with projections of an increase in sales tax and property tax. So we dodged a bullet. But the key thing was that the unfunded pension liability is eating us up. And the fact that PERS investment has diminished 25-30% in some cases. I'm not sure the exact amount, because we are a part of the public.
I understand that.
System, and it's projected that as we go forward, because we're not dealing with the unfunded liability today, it just keeps skyrocketing and increasing. The longer you delay addressing that problem, the more costly it's going to be in the end. I suggested, as I indicated in Alameda County when we went through that similar situation, Alameda came in with tiers. So you can't do anything about the employees because of the pension contracts we have with them today. But you can put in place a tier program whereby you pay less benefits, and in some cases the employee get a little bit more money to take home, but you don't have that extra financial liability on the part of the city. So it means that their pension, when they decide to determine to retire, obviously will be less. And the idea that the governor is proposing extending the pension retirement age. Public safety is one of the largest areas that are hitting us because in police, you retire at age 50. You're relatively a young person at age 50. And what we found is that Richmond police officers are retiring at age 50 and going to another jurisdiction outside of the PERS system and getting a job there, and they create another system of retirement. It's either the county or some other private. So
Okay.
the fire department, we did negotiate with them to make it 55. But
They never went to 50, right?
no, they didn't go to 50.
Right.
They went to 55. That was a negotiated deal we
Right.
made. But for the police and the other public, well, police service, age 50, and that retiring at age 50 is, ludicrous.
Okay, let me ask you, does anyone else have something they want to add to this, constructively on the discussion? Gary?
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Bates that pension reform is a very big challenge to balancing the city's budget. But I think another area that probably does not get discussed very much is the long-term debt. I mean,
The long-term debt of what?
The long-term debt of all of the loans and the bonds and things that the city has issued over a period of time. I mean, we have
For which long-term debt? For which?
Well, when the city redid Civic Center, okay, they had to issue bonds to do projects like that.
Right.
They borrowed money. Okay, you paid the bonds back, you have to pay interest on those bonds.
Sure.
Okay, so if you look very closely at the city's financial structure, the last time I looked, about 25 to 30% of all of the money that comes to the city goes to service that debt. Well, not just that debt, but even on the wastewater sewer. I mean, there are a number of different bonds, even on some of the streets and so forth. There have been a number of bonds that have been issued, and so we have a tremendous amount of debt sitting.
Does the city have an abnormally high capital bond debt?
It's getting real close to the state ceiling.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, it's getting real close to.
we have a high bond debt,
Yeah, we
but
do.
we've been able to because of the interest rates and everything. We started out real high because some of those interest rates were 5%,
Right.
6%. But because of the climate of the financial institution now, we've been able to refinance and get a real low interest rate, which is not as
Okay.
financial.
I'll spend a little time with city
Okay.
staff trying to get the exact numbers. But yeah, Marilyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just chime in on some of the debt. In terms of the wastewater, that is going to be an issue we're going to have to face. Of course, that is paid for by the ratepayers, not the city's general fund. However, we know we need a lot of infrastructure improvements, and that's going to be a big issue coming forward. And in terms of the pension, I do agree that we have to look at the pensions. I think the good thing about our finance director is that he's, forward-looking to, make sure the city council can prepare for these things as they come up. But I do think we need to address the pension issue. I think
How would you do that?
PERS needs to do a better job of its projections. Many of the projections are much too rosy and optimistic. They need to be more realistic so that the pension system pays for
Okay,
itself.
but you
as
can't
it goes
control
along.
PERS. What can
That's
you
right.
do?
We can control within the pension funds that we have. We need to look at how we give pensions to our employees. I think it's important to maintain a defined benefit system that has to be fair and it has to be reasonable. So I think the lower paid employees do need to make sure that they have a pension that they can survive on after they retire. The higher paid employees need to have a fair pension that reflects the level of work they did, but sometimes it just gets out of hand. I think pensions are there to give people a decent life in their retirement, not a life of luxury, and also to the extent we can address the issue of double dipping. So that when somebody retires at a relatively young age and gets a very high pension, then goes out and gets a full-time job, it's just not fair.
So you've conceptually discussed it. What
Right.
specifically would you do?
Well, I think we have to look at this in all of our negotiations with the public safety unions and with our senior management, the ones where the pensions tend to be the highest and are the biggest burden to the city, and address that to bring those into, make sure they're in line with something that we can really afford and will work for us going forward.
Mark?
we have to remember something. Now, Richmond is survived by state and federal funds. Richmond does not have its own bank account because it does not revenue enough money to pay for fire and police and so forth. Every penny that goes to the city of Richmond comes from federal and state government. That's the law. Now, when the state and federal government cuts back on a program here...
Hold on, wait a minute. That's just not so.
Yes, it is. It's true.
Okay.
Believe me, it's true.
Mike?
Thank you, sir. I just would like to capsulize everything in about 90 seconds, and that's all I have to contribute.
Pensions and debt is what our discussion is. Where are you at on this place?
The overall economy, the actual city government dollars and cents is showing signs it is not healthy. And there's sizable question marks why that is. I will let you talk with staff on that. That is your job to do. But my report would be that the current city financial director is incompetent. His staff is incompetent.
Why is that?
And we are not getting the full facts of information that...
What aren't you getting?
Okay, as an example, when they were attempting to balance the budget, what was that, late May, early June, as an example, sir, they were asking one of the local unions, SEIU, if they would be basically prepared to voluntarily accept certain conditions to downgrade benefits, payroll, etc. They were attempting, the council minus Mr. Bates and Mr. Bouzet were attempting to go ahead to make totalitarian, you will do this to go along.
Okay, my question,
meanwhile, to answer that question.
My question was, what I really want to understand is, do you have something you want to add in on pensions and debt?
What I would say is this, to look to unions that are the lifeline of city services, to ask them to downgrade, to go ahead to cover a cash flow that is already there, that the city is not talking or sharing with you about, I have sizable question marks about, sir. So my vision would be cut government spending, downsize managerial positions that are $150,000, $200,000, and let's really start having, since it is federal dollars coming through, let us bring in the federal and state level to do a thorough investigation of what is actually happening with the cash flow. Mr. Bell was the only one on watch that tried to give the city a warning that there was a meltdown back in another time. And I am beginning to see all of these symptoms again. I am not comfortable with it, and I think that right now that we need to be a little more accountable and a little more responsible of how city government is truly spending dollars. It is ridiculous.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Yes, Gary.
Just real quickly, in the pension area, as Councilman Bates said, you can look at tiered systems, so that you don't want to really mess with, you can't do much with the people that are already on pensions, but for those new coming in, you can negotiate with the collective bargaining group on ways that you can have a tier system coming in. But there's one other area also, it's called operational efficiency, which is what we do in business. You figure out how do you get the same things done at lesser cost. You can look at attrition, where you don't fill positions that don't necessarily need to be filled. And then you also implement as much technology as you can to get those operational efficiencies, so that you don't lower the service to the citizens, but you're getting it done with less dollars. So it's not really cutting, it's more or less how do you get more done with less.
So are you talking about less staff?
Well, no, not necessarily less staff, it's called operational efficiency. I mean, that's what
I mean, what is, how does that operational efficiency translate to savings?
Because you get more done with the same amount of people, because the service level has to stay the same, and there's always an increase or a demand for more service. But rather than hiring more people, you figure out how you do some things with technology versus hiring more people. And then when it comes time to filling positions, if you can figure out how do you get the same thing done with either less people.
Okay, so you're talking about less staff?
Well, not growing staff.
Okay. Tom?
You know, it's almost ironic you'd ask this question, because nobody knows more about it than you. And I read everything you write about it. And you know what the problem is, and you know how to fix it, and you tell us that every week. So we've got some work to do, but I just want to recap. In 2004, we capped health benefits, and we dropped the system where the city was paying the employees' share of the benefits. We did that for 6 years before a lot of cities started doing it. We've dropped 200 employees. The legislature just adopted a pension reform that's going to, everybody admits it's not as far as we need to go, but it's a start, and that's going to affect Richmond. But we still got work to do. We know what it is. We know what we have to do. All these things about split systems and all that's going to be looked at. But I think the point I try to make is that we are on a trajectory to deal with those problems. We've been on a trajectory since 2004. And I'm confident that we're going to deal with them. They're not easy. You can't.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. Yes, Eduardo, real quickly, and then we're going to get to the final question that I'm going to lay out for you, and I want each of you to address.
Pension restructuring is one of the major problems that we have, and I say restructuring as opposed to reform, because reform usually means that you're going in a positive direction, and a lot of times it's not. So I'll just say restructuring. And what we have is some unions getting far greater pensions than other unions, and we need to level the playing field. I was a teacher for 18 years. I only get $1,900 a month, and I make do with it. Huh? I'm 63.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So there's people who retire at 50 years old, and they make far more than I do. Having worked.
Okay, let me give you guys the lay of the land.
Okay.
And I want to hear very quickly from each of you what you're willing to do. If you take, and not one of you has mentioned retiree health. Not one of you.
I did.
I don't remember, but if you said OPEB or you
capped it in 2004.
Well, right now you guys have an unfunded liability between all your programs of your pension and your retiree health in excess of $300 million. You run the numbers, and it's 4.5 years of payroll, just an unfunded liability. You guys haven't done it second tier for any of your programs. You look at right now, if you're doing pay-go on your OPEB, which means you're digging yourself deeper in a hole. You're not even paying what you should be paying. If you start paying what you should be paying based on what you were shown last night at the city council meeting, I understand, by 15, 16, as I recall, you're $10 million short, and by 16, 17, when the Chevron money starts diminishing, you suddenly go off the cliff to, I believe, $15 or $16 million you're short in your budget. I want to hear something from each of you real quickly of what you plan to do about that, because that, as far as we're concerned, is one of the primary issues for this election. And you guys can talk about everything else you want, but if the city goes off a financial cliff, you can't do safety, you can't do economic development, you can't do soda and health programs, and the city, as I see it, is headed off a financial cliff. So, start with you, Eduardo, and then we're going to go right down the table. I want to hear real quickly, in 1 minute or less, what you're going to do about it. And do you understand what I just said?
I understand what you said,
okay.
and as I was about to say, we need to level the playing field in terms of pensions and health care that people in the city of Richmond receive. So I know that it's all negotiated by union, but I would ask the unions to.
I want to hear specifics of what you think should be done. Okay? We can talk about negotiating until we're blue in the face, but if you don't have a game plan, it's just more of the same. We've been, you guys are headed off a financial cliff. This city's been negotiating forever. I want to know what you're suggesting, specifics.
Well, it depends on negotiations. You can't just impose.
I want to hear where your starting point is, what you propose, because you can't go into negotiations without a game plan of what would happen.
Well, my game plan would be to ask the unions who have a higher percentage of pension and benefits to lower it down to what the other unions are getting, so that everyone's getting close to the same. I don't think it's fair for some people to be getting far more benefits than.
Who are some people?
I would say management, police, fire, unions, who could take some cuts and still not feel the pain, such as SEIU, which would, I mean, they're at a level that most of them couldn't live if they took cuts.
Tom?
Well, Dan, you know we got to get out of the defined benefit business. We have to do it, and I'm the only person who's a candidate or on the city council who actually runs a business and has to deal with these things. My retirement plan is a 401k plan and Social Security. I understand how it works, and I don't know why other people can't deal with that.
So why don't you guys have a second tier by now?
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. We instructed our management team back in July to come back to us with a plan to start going down that road and to find a way to get out from under our long-term pension obligations. We gave them those instructions. Now, what that sort of
what are you talking about? Second tier?
We asked them to give us various alternatives for doing it, including multi-tier plans. Now, what happened was they said, okay, we're going to do it. They said, let's wait until September, because let's wait and see what the legislature is going to do, because there was speculation that they were going to do something. Let's wait and see what they're going to do, and let's see how much of a dent their plan makes in our long-term pension plan, and then that'll give us a starting point of where we start, and then we'll know where we have to end. So it's not like we haven't thought about this before, and I think Nat will back me up. We told our staff to do it. They said they would do it. We're going to take it seriously.
Okay, well, let me ask you that. Why are you only paying PAYGO on OPEB?
Why what?
Why are you only paying PAYGO on OPEB? PAYGO on OPEB.
You know, I don't
know.
Do
you understand the question?
I don't.
Just asked?
No.
Okay.
Pay.
On your OPEB liability?
Yeah.
You are currently paying current retirees
okay,
directly.
I know what you're saying.
You are not setting aside any money right now.
No, we did it. We were setting aside money, and the economic downturn came, and we made a decision to stop putting
and what's
that
the
pot.
implication of that?
Well, the implication is that our pension obligation is growing.
Not your pension obligations. We're not talking pension right now.
And we're gonna,
your retiree debt is growing.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna deal with it.
But you're digging deeper while you're doing it.
Well, we've told our staff to come up with a plan to do it. We've taken it seriously, and we're going to do it. And all of the things.
What's your plan? What do you see as the elements of that plan?
Well, I told you before. I think the defined benefit is really the heart of the problem, and you know the history as well as any of us do about how that happened, how we got there, how we went down that road.
Okay, but that's the system we're in. So where are we going from there?
Well, we're going to have to deal with going into split plans, and we're just going to have to get out of that business, and then we're going to have to find a way to finance the long-term obligations. And we've done it before with bonds. We bonded that, and then roll those bonds over. And
so are you suggesting you should bond your unfunded liability?
Well, I think you may have to just to deal with it, but eventually you got to get to the root of the problem, which is the defined benefit.
What does bonding your unfunded liability get you?
It just provides a way of paying off securing the obligation, so that it's not just floating out there. It's a way of securing.
It's a debt either way. That's just because you're not willing to pay it right now. You could be paying into it right now.
As I said before, the end of the day is you just got to reform. You got to reform. You got to bite the bullet. You got to do it.
Sure, Dan, you asked about retiree health benefits, and I'm not surprised because that was in fact on my mind as well. It's that cost is skyrocketing, and the liability is getting way out of control. I have two things to say about that. I think it would be good to hold on to retiree health benefits as much as we can. as things get to the point where we simply can't, if we get to, then any reduction in retiree health benefits has to be across the board with all of the employee unions, with all of the management, so that you're not having one union work out a better deal than somebody else. We all have to take that sacrifice collectively if we do have to cut back on those. At the same time, and I feel very strongly about this, if we get single payer passed in California, that will eliminate that whole issue. I think the city council can advocate even more strongly for single
who's
payer
going to pass single payer
in California. And the city can join with other cities throughout the state and all local jurisdictions.
Are you going to hold up on that? Are you going to be waiting on that as your solution?
I'm not waiting on. As I say, if things get so bad, we may have to cut back on it. But at the same time, we have to keep our eye on the bigger prize.
When you say if things may get so bad, how much worse do they need to get?
Well, at the point
you're $300 some odd million in debt. How much are you there now or no?
Well, we're not there at the moment that we have to this year cut back on retirees' health benefits for the people who are receiving their pensions now.
When will you? What is your marker then where you would be there?
The marker would be looking at, say, the 5-year projections going out. How are we going to cover our obligations, looking in the next 5 years forward and looking at the trends? And that's what, like Tom said, that's what we're waiting to hear back from. And we've got to make sure we can address
I'm
all
sorry,
those
Marilyn.
trends.
I'm trying. You're saying that there's a problem here, but the math of what you're saying doesn't make sense. You are $300 million in the $300 million plus in the hole, 4.5 times annual city revenue, annual city payroll. I'm sorry.
But those are projected health.
No, those are not projected. That's where you are at today in your unfunded liability. That is where you are at today. Every day that goes on, that number gets worse. That is not a future number. That is today's number.
That the city is having to pay in benefits.
They are. That's how deep their unfunded liability is today. Okay. Mike?
If you have a healthy economy and people are going to have good paying jobs, you won't have these problems. But like I said, a fireman police officer makes about over $100,000 a year, right?
If you have a healthy economy, the healthy economy is not going to get you out of this.
Oh, it's not?
No, it's not. The numbers don't work.
Okay.
Next. Okay, do you have more you want to add then?
Yeah. Okay, like I say, you can only cut pensions so far. You can only cut the retirement so far. Okay? What are you going to do? Start cutting where the guy can't even afford to go down and buy a loaf of bread? You see what I'm saying? You have people on the executive boards make a lot more money, bigger pensions, and you got the guy as a laborer, he's going to make less money, and he's going to have less money for his pension. But the bottom line is you can only cut so much. You just can't cut his complete medical and dental and have him go to the county, because this is going to cost more money out of the taxpayer's pocket. You see what I'm saying? You can only cut so much. People talk about, well, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut that, we're in a deficit. The bottom line is you don't try not to get into a deficit. That's the bottom line.
Well, you're there now. So
it takes
you're
good
there.
management.
You're there deeply in it. Nat?
Personnel represents between 75 to 80% of our costs for local government. And Tom will probably acknowledge I was the first one that brought forward the tier program on the basis that's what I was as accustomed to in Alameda County. Until you bite the bullet, you're going to continue to be in this predicament.
What is biting the bullet entail?
Making hard choices. For an example, we just lost redevelopment. It's no longer such a department. But rather than laying off redevelopment staff, our staff found a way to manipulate the system and push them in over here in another department, We've lost a complete department. We no longer have redevelopment. But instead of making the hard decisions and the choices, We found spots for them. We've got to go.
Okay, let me cut to the chase with the question that the point I think you're raising, and see if this. Are you suggesting that there's going to have to be a cut in staff size?
There's going to have to be a cut in staff size because of, like I say, 75 to 80% of the budget is devoted to staff. Where else can you cut? You can't cut electricity and supplies and all of that. You've got to look at downsizing your department to make it efficient as possible and cost effective. Nobody want to do that. There's a popularity situation, I guess. No one want to bite the bullet and make the hard choices. And until you get individuals up there that are willing to make those hard choices, then we're going to continue to stagnate ourselves, and the budget, the liability is going to continue to increase unless we hit the line.
Mike?
You know, I was going to say, I'm very pleased with your hard questions. I like this. This is even better.
Okay, but what's your solution?
Okay, so I'm not one to go along to get along like the group here, so let me just cut to the chase. Right now, the bottom line is how we are doing business, the city government of business, is not working. So the question is, what's your idea or thoughts? This is what I would say. First of all, we have to downsize staff, particularly managerial. That's number one. Number two, we are now entering into a playing field that we have no clue of what the reality of the city government of Richmond and city services will be. No one knows. And I am not qualified to speak on some of the levels that are being stated here, but I do know one thing. What we need to have in the new election year is to call for an economic summit of all principles and to create new directions, new realities.
I'm going to keep you right on the focus question.
Sir, this is my time to speak, so I'm trying to respond to your question.
Well, I want you to respond to my question. Ken, we talked about the unfunded liability and the growing debt.
Okay, it is obviously a system that we cannot do Band-Aid solutions with, and surgery is pretty much dead on a dead body at this point. It is not going to work. These realities are not going to work. It is going to call for a whole reorging and a whole new reality check on what must be done. $300 million, in my way of thinking, sir, is unacceptable. And so what we have to start looking at is the source of the cancer and surgically remove it, by any means necessary. Because the reality check is, I tell you, and then I will finish my little statement, 4 more years of this, you think our city is a ghost town now? We will see more foreclosures. We will see more business withdrawing. You know, we are not in good shape. And for anyone to sit up here and say we're in a good place, I think is a very big mistake. But I am open and reasonable to forming strategies and alliances to rethink this whole process and do what is best, and to say, take a leadership authority, be responsible, and be accountable. And that is my statement, and thank you.
Sure. Tom talked about what happened in 2004. We had to make some very tough decisions then. I was on that council at that particular point in time. We had to lay off over 200 people, as you mentioned, and I had to cast one of those votes. And so when you ask the question, what will we do? Well, we'll do whatever's necessary. If that means, you say cutting positions, and yes, we'll have to cut positions. But what we'll have to do prior to that is establish the clear priorities for our city. And then when we start, if we have to cut, then we cut the places where we can afford to cut. We have to consider all the options like second-tier plans, reducing the cost of healthcare benefits to certain staff. And we did a lot of negotiation with staff. We came up with cost sharing. So those are some of the things that I would take a very strong look at. And when we do that, we have to figure out, okay, at what point do we want to get to where we have a safe amount of debt that we can manage and can handle? I don't think we're trying to pay down the full $300 million, because businesses always operate with some level of debt to some extent. That's just a part of being a business, and we are in a.
Do you understand the difference between the debt for retirement programs and the debt for bonded debt for buildings?
Yeah. Yeah, I understand.
The implications of it?
Yeah.
Okay, what are they?
Well, the debt for a building or a bond have a certain point in time where they end and there's an obligation to pay them. The debt for retirement can continue to increase because you have people retiring on a regular basis. So from actuarial or from a actuarial perspective, it can continue to escalate way out of control. And you really, all you can do is make projections on what that debt for retirement is going to be. It's not for a certain number, but a debt on a bond is a certain number that you're working with.
Well, the debt is a specific number to that.
Right. Well, okay. But what I'm saying is
so
the two different types of financial situations.
So you're saying you're going to, when would you start making those hard decisions?
Once I'm elected. I mean, the idea is that you start, when we went through the thing in 2004, I was one of the few people that saw very clearly and started talking about it so that we had to go through what we went through. The best way to do things like this is you try to prevent them from actually becoming a catastrophe, or you try to prevent yourself from going off the financial cliff. So we have a little bit of time right now, but you have to start addressing that problem right now. I can talk about it and pontificate and tell you what my ideas are right now, but until I'm in the position and I can see all the specific facts, where you sit down as a council member, then I can start telling you, okay, yeah, we'll do what's necessary. But what I am saying to you is that I have voted before. I'm on record as doing what's necessary to maintain the fiscal responsibility of our city. Sometimes you have to do things like that so you can live to fight another day. I mean, sometimes, and it's not very popular. It's not very comfortable. I still think about the people that we had to lay off at that particular point in time. But as pointed out, it was the right thing to do at that particular point in time. Exactly where would those cuts come? I don't know. When I mentioned to you about operational efficiencies earlier, that meant not hiring new people, and Councilman Bates talked about how when people, you spread that around and you get people to do different works. You do some of those kind of things on a day-to-day basis, but on the long term, that's going to take a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussion, a lot of study, a lot of analysis, and then you make those decisions based on the best information you have at that particular point in time. But whatever it takes to do that, I've done it before.
Okay, folks, anything that I need to know real quickly?
If and when medical caps are placed, they should be done by a percentage of the salary that the person makes. That way the cuts are more equitable.
Tom?
You know, I think you asked all of us, and most of us, the same question: when are you going to start? And what I'm trying to get out here is that we've already started. You know, our staff gave us the same projections that you've recited back in, starting back in our mid-year budget reports back in January, February.
But you just passed a budget that's PAYGO, that has PAYGO.
Well,
I mean, which basically means you have essentially
a
budget that's underfunded by $6 million right now.
Okay, hear me out. I'll make it quick. Our staff gave us the same figures that you've recited back to us throughout the spring. We knew we know we have a big problem, and we instructed our staff to come up with some alternatives to get there. And there's more than one way to skin the cat. And the only thing we agreed to do was to put off them rolling those plans out until after the legislature acted on pension reform, so we could see what they've done, and we would have a marker to work from, so that we wouldn't be doing something that we got to start all over again. So we are actually, we're in that process. We've already started. We take this seriously, and I think that what I would like to say is that I think you can be both an optimist and a realist at the same time. And that's what I am. I'm optimistic we're going to solve it, but I'm also a realist that we have the problem, we know the magnitude of it, and we've got to come to grips with it.
I'm going to leave you guys with a thought. All of you guys with a thought. We editorialized 2 years ago when the Chevron money came down that you ought to set that aside and deal with your financial problems. Instead, you just poured it straight into the general fund. Meanwhile, you failed to even pay your mounting debt on OPEB. You've let it get worse. That makes no sense. Now, and in 5 years, you're going to hit another cliff, because then that money that you've built in from Chevron into your budget takes a huge hit, takes a huge drop. So you've made your problems worse. You ignored what we said a couple of years ago. We warned you 2 years ago. Don't do it. You did it.
agree?
Thank you very much, folks.